Why is it so hard for us to predict a crisis before it happens? Well, the first question to ask ourselves, I guess, is which crisis can we predict? There seem to be so many around us. But you know what? There is actually some science to this, and I think a little bit of thought can help us explore this a little more. Hello, I'm Sandhya and welcome to Dynamic Living. Today I thought we could discuss the case of a bank. Yes, you may have all heard about it. It's Yes Bank. It was one of the country's more promising banks, and yet we suddenly find that the Reserve Bank of India has placed the bank under a 1-month moratorium, and that its board of directors has been suspended, and a lot of the investors in the bank who'd had their money kept there went into shock and were racing, forming long lines trying to take their money out. And if this came as a surprise to you, it really shouldn't have. The fact of the matter is that people have known since as early as 2017 that the bank was in trouble, that its shareholders had disputes amongst themselves, that they were giving out very risky loans. And yet, what is it in us that doesn't allow us to see the trouble that's coming, that's able to anticipate what's going on, that's able to take remedial measures? In his book, The Biological Mind, author Alan Jasanoff suggests that there's a lot to our thoughts and feelings that are impacted by the outside world. Now, we know that, but just to what extent this is true? Well, think about it this way. Our brains are bombarded with information. Again, common knowledge. But do you know that this happens almost at the rate of 10 megabytes a second? That's enough to make the average computer simply crash. With us, we have news channels shouting headlines, creating stress and panic in us. We have information over WhatsApp. We have information from the net. We constantly are getting bombarded by information from the world around us that we're taking in through our senses. This takes up almost 40% of our cortexes working. We're taking in all this. But the question is, when do we have time to process all of this, assimilate all of it, assess the risks of all of this or the benefits in any of this? You'd think that our attention would also be something that's top down, right? That our attention would go to the thing that needed it the most, and that it was like a torchlight shining on it, as the author says again in his book. But no, our attention also is often driven bottom up, which means that we seek out the attention that we already were predisposed to. That means that we look for views of the world that confirm our inner biases. And we do this a lot more by getting our information in silos. We don't read a general interest newspaper anymore, for example. Our feeds often understand what our interests are, where our biases are, and feed into that. You've seen that with Facebook. The same happens with many news feeds. Everything's designed to pique your interest, pique your anxiety, and trigger a "I want more of this" response out of you. As a result, we'll often ignore warning signs simply because we're so much more tuned to the rewards that a particular action brings. Yes, this was a bank that gave high-risk loans. I'm in a high-risk business. Which bank would I prefer? Yes, startups preferred this bank because they gave far more favorable conditions. Risky business, risky terms, but hey, quick profits. Added to that, the entire private banking sector has a system of giving high rewards to people who bring in these fabulous deals and who make these risky investments, and they have absolutely no downside. It's not their money. They have no skin in the game. They have nothing to lose. And so we get greedy. We feed off these quick wins, these big promises, these big profits in the short term. And we are simply unable to see the long-term consequences of our choices, of our actions. This sort of behavior doesn't just happen with individuals. This happens at a corporate entity level as well. Corporations behave like a collection of individuals, going after the short-term profits, ignoring the longer-term risks. Now, free markets dictate that such entities will continue to exist with varying degrees of control and supervision, but exist there will, and they will always find takers. There's not very much you and I can do about that. But what we can do is make more conscious choices. And that means to start off with, to take in less. to take in less stimulus, to take in more slow news. Our brain processes the written word very differently than it does moving images. So switch off news channels, start reading a more wide interest newspaper instead. Read two if you want to get differing opinions and not just one that's aligned to a particular ideology or thought process. Give yourself time. We don't need to get updates through the day of a virus that's hitting the country. A few hours of break from it is going to do nothing very big in our lives. Instead, it allows us to sit back and really think about how we want to plan our lives and what choices we want to make. Whether you're a company or whether you're an individual, having a strong set of values, a mission statement, a vision that you live by can also guide your life. Earlier, we had religion and leaders telling us what to do. Today, it's more individualistic a process. You can put up systems in your family that's democratic and that people are all aligned to, that you can move towards. And you know what? It really doesn't matter if a bulk of the people are rushing for the next gold rush, so to speak. Once we take a step back, our intuition can also come into play. So far, there's no real evidence to predict that human beings can predict future events, but we certainly have some amount of precognition or presentiment where our senses can take in stimuli and process this information to predict the future. That's as simple as saying that if you can see the dark clouds, you can predict that a storm is coming. And when that storm comes, the question you need to be asking yourself is, are you the one who gets washed away in the flood? Or will you be the one with the life jacket on? Thank you for listening.